The first time I saw the number, I thought YouTube was glitching. 5 million views. I refreshed the page. Still there. 5 million. My hands were shaking so badly I had to put my phone down on the desk just to steady myself. Because the same exact video, the same file, the same words, had been posted 9 other times that week. And those versions? 12 views, 18 views, 7 views, 0 comments. But this one? It exploded. And the worst part? The people who laughed at me were suddenly pretending they always believed in me. Let me rewind. For 2 years, I was the algorithm guy in my friend group. The obsessed one. The nerd who talked about click-through rate at dinner. The guy who ruined parties by explaining retention graphs. My name is Ryan. I'm 27, and I have been trying to make it on YouTube for almost 3 years. 3 years of uploading. 3 years of silence. 3 years of humiliation disguised as, just keep grinding, bro. You ever refresh a video and watch it climb from 3 views to 3 views? That kind of silence does something to you. It gets in your chest. Makes you question whether you're delusional. My older brother, Mark, used to smirk whenever I mentioned YouTube. You still doing that little video thing? He'd ask. Little video thing. He works corporate. Finance. Always polished. Always composed. Always subtly superior. Family dinners were the worst. So Ryan, my aunt would say, smiling too sweetly, how's a hobby? Hobby. I'd nod. Fake smile. It's growing. It wasn't. Inside, though, I felt this quiet rage building. Not at them. At myself. Because I knew I wasn't bad. I studied thumbnails like they were engineering diagrams. I tested titles. I analyzed audience behavior. I'd sit in the dark at 2 a.m., replaying my own content, asking myself why strangers didn't care. Was I boring? Ugly? Unlikable? Or was I just invisible? Then one night, something snapped. I was watching creator I used to outperform in editing quality hit 1.2 million views on a video that was objectively worse than mine. The lighting was bad. The pacing was sloppy. But the title? Brilliant. The packaging? Perfect. That's when it hit me. It wasn't the content. It was the rapper. So I ran an experiment. 1 video. Same footage. Same script. Same editing. But I would upload it 10 different ways. Different titles. Different thumbnails, different descriptions, different emotional triggers. It wasn't desperation. It was war. For 72 hours, I barely slept. My room looked like a crime investigation board. Thumbnails scattered across my monitor. CTR predictions scribbled on sticky notes. I felt insane, but focused. The first upload went live. 12 views. Second one. 18 views. Third. I could hear Mark's voice in my head. Maybe it's just not meant for you. By the time I posted the 7th variation, my confidence was bleeding out of me. What if I was wrong? What if content really didn't matter? What if I was just coping? I remember staring at version 9 before hitting publish. The thumbnail was darker. My face slightly blurred. 3 bold words. I was lied to. The title wasn't optimized for search. It was optimized for curiosity. I hesitated. If this failed too, I didn't know how many more humiliations I could take. I hit publish anyway. Then I closed my laptop. Didn't check it for hours. I went for a walk at 3 a.m. The city was empty. Cold air biting my skin. I kept replaying everything in my head. Maybe I should quit. Maybe Mark was right. Maybe I wasn't built for this. When I got back home, I almost didn't open YouTube Studio. But I did. And that's when I saw it. 3,000 views. I blinked. Refreshed. 8,200. My heart started pounding. By morning, 47,000. By the next day, 310,000. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Comments flooding in. Subscribers climbing so fast the number looked fake. And then, it crossed 1 million. The same video. The same exact footage. But one version was going viral like wildfire, and 9 were dead. That's when the real story began. Because success didn't just bring validation. It brought something else. It brought people back into my life. People who had watched me fail. People who had smirked. People who had quietly rooted for me to give up, and the way they reacted changed everything. The first person to text me was Mark. Of course it was. Bro, just saw your video. 1.3 M views? That's insane. Proud of you. Proud. The word felt heavy. Fake. Like it had been sitting in drafts for 3 years waiting for permission to exist. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. 3 years ago, when I asked him for advice on investing in better camera equipment, he laughed. Maybe invest in a real career first. I remember the heat in my face that night, the way my fork scraped against the plate because my hand was shaking. And now he was sending fire emojis. I typed back, thanks. That was it. Short, controlled, because something inside me had shifted. You see, when that video crossed 2 million views, something happened that I didn't expect. Brands started emailing me. Real ones, not those fake exposure offers. Actual companies offering 5 figures for sponsorship placements. I reread one email 5 times just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. 5 figures. 4-1 integration. 4 years. I had calculated how much I'd need to earn monthly to shut everyone up. To finally sit at that dinner table without feeling like the family disappointment. And suddenly, it was possible. But here's where it gets interesting. I didn't celebrate. I didn't pop champagne. I didn't post a victory story on Instagram. Instead, I opened analytics. Because the experiment wasn't over. Why did version 9 explode and the others die? Same content, different packaging. I compared thumbnails side by side. Version 1, clean, professional, safe. Version 2, informative, clear, logical. Version 9, emotional, mysterious, slightly uncomfortable. The CTR on version 9 was 14.8%. The others, 2%, 1.7%, 0.9%. It wasn't skill. It was psychology. And that realization, that was power. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel like a victim of the algorithm. I felt like I understood it. But success changes how people treat you faster than money hits your bank account. My aunt called me, the same one who used to say hobby. So Ryan, I always knew you were creative, she said. Always knew. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling while she talked. Memory is funny like that. People rewrite history in their favor. Even my friends started acting different. Group chat energy shifted. Before, when I'd share a new upload link, it would get a thumbs up emoji. Maybe. Now, bro, you're famous. Don't forget us when you're rich. Jokes, but not really jokes. I could feel something underneath it. Envy. And that's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to tell anyone about the 9 failed uploads. No one knew the viral video was just one version of 10. To them, it looked like overnight success. To me, it was data warfare, and I was about to weaponize it. Because here's what most people don't understand about humiliation. It doesn't disappear when you succeed. It stays. It hardens. It becomes fuel. Every laugh at dinner. Every smirk. Every maybe you should apply for jobs again. They replayed in my head while the subscriber count climbed. 2.4 million views. 3.1 million. 4.6 million. The comments were insane. This changed my perspective. I needed to hear this. You deserve way more subscribers. Deserve. That word hit differently. For years, I felt invisible. Now strangers were validating something my own circle dismissed. But the real turning point? Mark asked to meet. In person. Let's grab coffee. I want to talk content strategy. He texted. Content strategy. The same guy who once said, nobody makes real money from YouTube unless they get lucky. I almost said no, but then I paused, because this wasn't just about views anymore. This was about something deeper. Respect. And I realized something sitting there in my apartment, staring at that 5 million view counter climbing higher by the minute. I had something Mark didn't. Understanding. He thought this was luck. He thought one video hit. He had no idea I cracked the code. And I wasn't going to correct him. Not yet. Because the real revenge wasn't proving him wrong loudly. It was letting him underestimate me again. And then making him pay for it strategically. When we met at the cafe 2 days later, he walked in differently, less confident, more curious. "Man," he said, sitting down. "So what happened? What did you change?" I took a slow sip of coffee, held eye contact, and smiled slightly. "Nothing," I said, which wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. He nodded like he understood. He didn't. And that misunderstanding? That was going to be important. Because while everyone else saw one viral video, I was already preparing something bigger. And this time, it wouldn't be 10 versions. It would be calculated domination. Mark leaned forward across the cafe table. "So, walk me through it," he said. "What changed?" His voice was casual, but his eyes weren't. They were calculating. For the first time in my life, my older brother wasn't speaking down to me. He was trying to decode me. And I can't lie. It felt good. Not loud. Not explosive. Just quiet power. I shrugged. Just tested some things. He smirked slightly. Tested what? There it was. The same tone he used when we were kids, and I tried explaining something technical to him. Except now, he needed the explanation. I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the foam dissolve. Titles. Thumbnails. Emotional triggers. He nodded like he already knew that. Yeah, but what specifically? Like what made that one pop? I looked at him. Really looked at him. 3 years ago, I had asked him for advice on how to build consistency. He told me consistency doesn't matter if nobody cares. Now he was asking me how to make people care. The irony almost made me smile. Curiosity gap, I said finally. Unresolved tension. Human psychology. He leaned back. That's it. He frowned slightly, because that answer wasn't enough. He wanted a formula, a shortcut, a cheat code, the same cheat code he assumed I didn't have. And in that moment, I realized something dangerous. Mark didn't respect effort. He respected results, which meant if I wanted true revenge, it wouldn't be emotional. It would be financial. Over the next few weeks, the viral video kept climbing. 5 million, 5.3 million, 5.8 million. My subscriber count tripled. My inbox flooded with brand deals, collaboration requests, even management agencies trying to sign me. And suddenly, Mark started asking different questions. How much does 5 million views even pay? Are brands reaching out? You thinking of scaling this? Scaling. That word hit something in me. Because while everyone was reacting to one viral moment, I was studying the pattern. I reposted the experiment quietly again. Different video this time. Same strategy. 10 versions. Different packaging. 9 died. 1 exploded. 2.1 million views in 2 weeks. It wasn't luck. It was replicable. And that's when the shift happened inside me. I stopped wanting validation. I started wanting leverage. You ever notice how people who underestimate you suddenly become supportive once there's something to gain? Mark started suggesting ideas. You should build a course. You could consult for brands. I could help with the financial structuring. Help! I almost laughed. Because 3 years ago, when I needed help believing in myself, he offered doubt. Now that there was money involved, he offered partnership. And here's the thing. I didn't explode at him. I didn't confront him about the past. I did something much colder. I listened. I let him talk. I let him believe we were brainstorming as equals. Inside, though, I was calculating. Because if psychology could make strangers click, it could expose character too. One night, he called me. "Listen," he said, "I've been thinking. If we turn this into a media company, we could scale hard. I know investors." Investors? He never once believed in my content, but he believed in numbers. And now I had numbers. I walked to my window and stared at the city lights while he pitched me. His voice was confident again. Not because he believed in me, because he believed in profit. And that realization did something to my chest. Not anger. Clarity. The humiliation I felt for years wasn't accidental. It was hierarchy. As long as I was struggling, I was beneath him. Now that I had leverage, he wanted proximity. And that's when I made a decision. I was going to let him step in. Not because I needed him, but because I wanted to see how far ambition would push him. Because revenge isn't loud. It's patient. I agreed to a meeting. We drafted rough ideas for a content agency. He got excited, started talking percentages, started assuming roles. Obviously, since I'd handle investor relations, equity split should reflect that. There it was. Even now, even after 5 million views, he still saw himself as the architect, and me, the creative tool. I smiled slowly. Yeah, I said, let's map it out. He didn't notice the shift in my tone. He didn't notice I wasn't emotionally reacting anymore. Because while he was thinking expansion, I was thinking exposure. Because here's what Mark didn't know. Every version of that viral video, every failed upload, every test, was documented. Screenshots, data sheets, time-stamped analytics. Proof that success wasn't luck. Proof that strategy beat ego. And I was about to build something bigger than a channel. I was going to build authority. Public authority. And when that happened, the hierarchy would flip permanently. But before that could happen, Mark made a move I didn't see coming. And it forced me to choose between keeping the peace or making a statement that would change our relationship forever. I should have seen it coming. Looking back, the signs were obvious. But betrayal never announces itself loudly. It creeps in quietly, disguised as opportunity. 2 weeks after our media company brainstorming session started, Mark asked me for something small. Send me your analytics dashboard screenshots, he said casually over the phone. Investors will want to see consistent growth. Investors. The word had started to sound heavier every time he said it. I hesitated, not because I didn't trust him, but because something in my gut felt off. Still, I sent a curated version. Clean, impressive, enough to validate growth, not enough to expose the mechanics. He replied almost instantly. Perfect. This is strong. Strong. That word used to feel like something I wasn't. Now it felt like something he needed. Over the next few days, Mark's energy changed. He was busier, less responsive, more in meetings. Whenever I asked what stage we were at with these supposed investors, he'd deflect. Early conversations. Just positioning. Nothing concrete yet. And then one night, I got a DM from someone I didn't know. Hey, are you the rhyme behind the 10 upload strategy concept? My stomach tightened. I hadn't told anyone about the 10 versions. That was internal. That was my leverage. I replied carefully. Who's asking? The guy responded with a screenshot. It was a pitch deck, a polished, investor-ready slide presentation. Title: Emotionally Engineered Content Scaling Model. Subtitle: Proven Viral Replication Framework. My framework, my words, my terminology, even my phrasing about curiosity gaps and unresolved tension loops. And at the bottom right corner of the slide, prepared by Mark H. My chest went cold. Not hot, cold. The kind of cold where your body doesn't process anger yet. Just shock. I scrolled, slide after slide. Data charts I had shared privately. Graphs lifted from my analytics. My experiment. Rebranded. Repackaged. Without my name anywhere on the methodology. I felt my jaw clench so hard it hurt. He wasn't pitching us. He was pitching himself. Using my system. Without telling me. Without crediting me. Without even finishing the structure conversation. 3 years of being underestimated suddenly made sense. It wasn't just that he didn't believe in me. It was that he never saw me as a primary player. Even now, even after proof, even after 5 million views, he still saw himself as a strategist. And me? The accidental talent. I called him immediately. He didn't pick up. Of course he didn't. So I waited. 10 minutes. 20. An hour. Finally, my phone rang. Hey, he said casually. What's up? I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. My voice was steady. I saw the deck. Silence. Just half a second. But it was there. Oh, he said. Yeah, I was going to tell you. Were you? When? I just wanted to test investor interest before pulling you into formal meetings. Pulling me in, like I was optional. You used my framework, I said calmly. Our framework, he corrected quickly. No, not ours. Mine. But I didn't say that yet. Because this wasn't about emotion anymore. This was about control. He kept talking. Listen, Ryan, you're creative. That's your strength. But scaling requires positioning. I'm just opening doors. Opening doors. To rooms I built, with keys he didn't earn. You should have told me, I said. He sighed. You're being sensitive. Sensitive. That word hit harder than anything else. 3 years of grinding alone. 3 years of humiliation. 3 years of data testing. And now I was sensitive. I could feel my pulse in my ears. But I didn't explode. Because in that moment, I realized something. He had just handed me the ultimate leverage. He underestimated me again. He thought I'd react emotionally. He thought I'd argue. He thought I'd need him. Instead, I said something he didn't expect. Send me the full deck. Pause. Why? Because if we're pitching this properly, I want to review it. There was hesitation in his breathing now. He wasn't as confident as he pretended to be. But he sent it. And when I opened the full version, that's when I saw how deep it went. He had positioned himself as founder and strategic architect. My role? Content execution lead. Execution. Not architect. Not strategist. Execution. That word did something inside me. A quiet snap. Because here's the truth. 4 years, I thought my revenge would be proving them wrong. But now, it wasn't about proving anything. It was about ownership. Ownership of my system. Ownership of my narrative. Ownership of my value. And Mark had just made one fatal mistake. He put my intellectual property in writing. In a pitch deck. Time-stamped. Circulated. That wasn't betrayal. That was evidence. And the moment I realized that, the anger faded, replaced by something colder. Strategy. Because if he wanted to play hierarchy games, if he wanted to step into rooms using my data, then I wasn't going to confront him emotionally. I was going to let him walk further. Let him schedule meetings. Let him speak confidently. Let him build momentum. And then I was going to flip the entire room. Not with shouting, not with drama, but with facts. Because this time, I wasn't the underestimated little brother. I was the architect. And architects don't scream. They demolish quietly. The week after I discovered the deck, I started building my plan. I didn't call Mark. I didn't confront him. I didn't even hint at my awareness. Instead, I created what I now call the shadow strategy. Every email, every meeting, every investor interaction he initiated, I observed. I collected screenshots, timestamps, and audio where possible. I documented every claim he made about our system, every time he positioned himself as a founder, and every omission of my contribution. It was methodical, surgical, cold, because this wasn't about drama anymore. It was about exposure. I even started tweaking my content quietly. Slight variations of the viral video, ones that weren't obvious to anyone but me, tested for retention, emotional resonance, and virality triggers. I wanted to see how easily I could manipulate the same system, just as he had assumed it was a one-hit wonder. Every new test further reinforced my dominance. I was no longer a victim. I was a strategist running experiments on both the algorithm and the people in my life. Then came the tipping point. Mark invited me to a private meeting at a co-working space. He called it a strategy alignment session. I knew what it really was, a chance for him to solidify his claim as the architect of our so-called media company. I showed up early, dressed casually, just enough to look professional but approachable. I wanted to disarm him. The moment he arrived, he smiled that familiar smirk, that patronizing look he always wore when he thought he had the upper hand. But now, it would work against him. We sat down. He started pitching, using slides from the deck I had just discovered. The same slides, the same phrasing. I let him talk. I nodded occasionally, made notes, looked impressed. I even praised some of the insights he had written, small seeds of validation that made him confident. All the while, I recorded the session. Every word, every assertion that he had created the framework. Every time he claimed credit. Audio, video, everything. 2 hours in, he leaned back, looking satisfied. So, With my contacts, we can pitch to these investors next week. I'll handle the negotiations. I smiled quietly, my hands resting on the table. Perfect. I'll help with the creative, like always. He didn't notice the double meaning. Like always. When he left, I stayed behind, reviewing the recording. I could hear my own thoughts narrating the situation. Patience, Ryan. Let him reveal everything. Let him overplay his hand. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because of anger, but because of anticipation. I was constructing a network of proof that would demonstrate clearly who built the system, who created the strategy, and who had been manipulated. And I wasn't just going to expose him to me. I was going to expose him publicly, in a way that would be undeniable. Over the next days, I refined every piece of evidence. Time-stamped analytics, saved messages, emails, screenshots of every failed upload compared to the viral one. I even created a visual document that contrasted his pitch deck with my original experiment notes. It was painstaking, but every detail mattered. I imagined Mark sitting in investor meetings, thinking he had control, while I quietly accumulated the ultimate leverage. Then came the subtle moves. I allowed him to bring in another colleague, someone neither of us trusted completely. He was the perfect witness, a person who would unwittingly reinforce my evidence when the time came. Mark continued positioning himself as a mastermind, and I continued quietly documenting. Every overconfident statement became a nail in his coffin. Every assumed superiority became a piece of the puzzle. I even started posting new content under my own channel, letting the virality grow organically, so that any comparison with his claims would highlight the truth. Subtle branding changes, slight modifications to titles, nothing too obvious, just enough that anyone cross-referencing his claims would see where the real strategy originated. The thrill of watching him act like he was ahead while I had the entire blueprint in my hands was intoxicating. By now, the situation had shifted entirely. This wasn't revenge born of emotion. This was a surgical dismantling of someone who had consistently underestimated me. He thought he was controlling the narrative. He had no idea that the narrative was already mine. Mark still believed he was in control. He had scheduled investor meetings, sent emails asserting himself as a founder, and even drafted contracts assigning himself the largest equity share. Every action he took only added to my evidence. Every overconfident word, every assumption, every misstep was now documented and time-stamped. I had become almost invisible in these interactions, not participating, not correcting him, not reacting. He thought this passivity was complacency, a lack of confidence on my part. But it was far from it. Inside, I was calculating every variable, every potential angle, every possible outcome, every psychological leverage point. I started preparing a master presentation, a detailed, undeniable proof of authorship and strategy. It was a meticulous reconstruction of every step. The initial 10-upload experiment, analytics chart showing CTR differences, timestamps of failed uploads, internal messages, and even a visual timeline of Mark appropriation of my ideas. I formatted it so clearly that anyone could see the narrative. Ryan built the system. Mark stole the claim. The day came when he announced he would present our joint strategy to potential investors. He emailed me the meeting time, invited me under the guise of collaboration. He never suspected I had the master document ready. I arrived early, pretending to review my notes. He walked in, confident, carrying the deck he thought he owned. He started speaking, detailing the framework, asserting himself as the architect, highlighting his connections, and assigning me the role of execution lead. I nodded quietly, occasionally jotting notes, giving subtle signs of engagement. He smiled, fully believing he had dominance. Halfway through, I interrupted softly, calmly. Mark, I think there's something important we need to clarify for the investors before you present this further. His confident expression faltered slightly. He glanced at me, questioning. I handed him a tablet with the master document open on the first slide. This is the original system I developed, with all analytics, timestamps, and documentation. I watched his face change. First disbelief, then confusion, then panic. He tried to argue, but the evidence was airtight. Every claim he had made about ownership crumbled instantly in front of him, in front of the investors, in front of everyone in the room. I spoke calmly, deliberately. Everything you see here proves authorship, origin, and methodology. This isn't about personal grievances. It's about intellectual property, accuracy, and transparency. These investors deserve the truth. The silence was palpable. Investors whispered to each other. Mark's voice cracked as he tried to recover. I let the moment stretch. The humiliation was perfect. Not loud, not violent, but deeply satisfying. His panic, his loss of control, his realization that he had overplayed himself. It was exquisite. By the end of the meeting, the investors were aligned with me. Mark had no choice but to step back, acknowledging my authorship publicly, and the room collectively recognized the truth. The emotional release I felt was overwhelming, not from anger, but from validation. I finally understood. Revenge doesn't have to be chaotic or vengeful in the traditional sense. It can be methodical, strategic. It can be subtle, controlled, and utterly devastating because it leverages intelligence, patience, and timing. And in that room, I had won, quietly, decisively, and permanently. After the investors left, the room felt like a vacuum. The air was thick with tension and unspoken words. Mark sat at the head of the table. His confident posture completely collapsed. He was a man stripped of assumed authority in front of witnesses he had thought were his allies. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I simply exhaled, leaned back in my chair, and let the silence do the work. That silence spoke louder than any argument I could have made. The aftermath was immediate. Emails poured in, not just from the investors, but from other content creators and agencies who had been watching the situation unfold quietly online. People wanted to work with me. People wanted insight into my system. Requests for collaborations, sponsorships, and consulting flooded my inbox faster than I could respond. Mark, on the other hand, retreated. He reached out later, trying to salvage some dignity, but the damage was done. His credibility had taken a permanent hit. He had underestimated the power of evidence, strategy, and patience. His miscalculation wasn't emotional. It was tactical. And that's where he had lost. Over the next few weeks, I started consolidating my brand. I documented everything publicly, sharing insights on viral strategy, analytics, and audience behavior without directly naming Mark. But the clarity of authorship was unmistakable. The community recognized the work for what it was. I was no longer just a nerdy YouTuber who failed repeatedly. I was the architect, the strategist, the one who had cracked the code while staying calm under pressure. Mark's attempts to regain relevance were subtle, almost desperate. I watched from the sidelines, letting him make every move, knowing that the evidence and the network I had built would always reinforce my authority. Every step he took to assert himself now served as proof of his prior overreach and misrepresentation. Personally, the shift in my relationships was profound. Friends who had doubted me now asked for advice. My family's tone changed. There was respect in the conversations that had previously been patronizing. I realized that revenge isn't only about the other person. It's about reclaiming your narrative, your power, and your peace of mind. By the time my next viral video hit, the scale was unprecedented. 6 million, 7.2 million, 8.1 million views. And each time, I knew that every incremental success was also a statement. I was no longer invisible. I was no longer underestimated. And the most satisfying part, it wasn't the numbers. It wasn't the recognition. It was a certainty that the people who once treated me as nothing could now witness firsthand the result of patience, intelligence, and quiet determination. In the end, the lesson was simple yet powerful. True revenge isn't chaotic or destructive. It's strategic, patient, and deeply satisfying. You take the moment you were once denied, control it, and reclaim it in a way that leaves no doubt who holds the real power. After the showdown, life didn't immediately become perfect. There were subtle adjustments, shifts in relationships, and an undercurrent of tension that followed Mark wherever he went. But for me, everything had changed internally. I wasn't chasing validation anymore. I had earned authority and control, not just through numbers, but through strategy, foresight, and patience. Mark tried small maneuvers. At family dinners, he attempted casual dominance, subtle comments about how he was guiding investors or helping me scale. I smiled politely, nodding, Every word he spoke was now evidence of his prior misjudgment. I didn't have to call him out. The facts spoke for themselves. His credibility was quietly eroding with every false claim he made in front of people who now knew my work. Professionally, I doubled down. I launched a series of tutorials on viral video strategy, building my channel into a platform that wasn't just content. It was education, insight, and authority. Subscribers multiplied. Brand deals multiplied, and every success reinforced a narrative I had carefully constructed. Ryan was not just a creator. Ryan was a strategist. Mark reached out once, nervously, after a conference where he presented the deck without me. He attempted to reframe the narrative, trying to insert himself into my growing credibility. I replied succinctly, not aggressively, but with precision. Glad to see the framework being useful. Please credit accordingly. He paused, then silence. No argument, no pushback. For the first time, he understood the limits of what he could manipulate. I realized the final part of my revenge wasn't in public humiliation. It wasn't in confrontation. It was in the quiet reclamation of my life, my work, and my narrative. I had been underestimated for years, dismissed, laughed at, but now I was untouchable in ways he could never undo. Every investor, every colleague, every subscriber knew the truth without me ever saying his name. And the strangest part? The satisfaction wasn't even about him anymore. It was about me. The control, the foresight, the knowledge that I could take chaos, manipulation, and underestimation and convert it into lasting authority and respect. The power wasn't loud. It was quiet, methodical, and irreversible. By the end of that year, my channel had grown tenfold. Opportunities one had once dreamed of were now realities. But the most important change? My mindset. I no longer feared being overlooked. I no longer accepted underestimation. And every time I saw Mark attempt to assert dominance, I smiled, because he had taught me exactly how far someone would go when they underestimated the wrong person. And that, finally, was true revenge.